Welcome back to another day here on the Winter's Lorcana channel. Today we're going to do something different, and I know the title's already given it away. I don't know why I do these things. Today we're going to be building a deck. How to build a Lorcana deck. And the only reason I want to do this video is because I have been getting a lot of comments. You guys really enjoyed my thoughts and feedback about how to upgrade a deck, which was not intentional. It just was happenstance that we did that. But I do make a new deck almost every single day. For a while there, I was making a week's worth of decks in one day, and then for a long time now, I've been building the deck the night before I record a video. So a big thing is how do you build a deck, right? For me, my deck building process is pretty straightforward. It's pretty, I want to say simple, but there are a few parts of it that can be difficult, including step number one. And I think this is probably where a lot of people might be tripping up on decks, is where to begin. And admittedly, even for me, that is probably the hardest part, is trying to decide where to begin. So for me, I like to find something that has a cool ability and try to deduce if I can or cannot build a deck around that card. So for example, we'll just take Owl here. 3 cost, 3/3, already pretty decent, right? Like, that's okay. And he has an ability that says during your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, chosen opposing character gets -1 strength until the start of your next turn. So basically all I do is I look at that ability and I think, is this a good ability? Does it have a big impact on the game? Can it win a game? And does it generate any value? Those are really the things I'm looking for the most. On the surface, no, I don't see it winning a game. It does not really generating any value. It needs additional stuff to make this be worth it. And then on top of that, like, his ability only triggers when you ink, so you're gonna be doing a lot of inking. So Owl already, like, if I was gonna build a deck around him, I already know the deck just because of the ink portion of it. It's not, and incidentally, I also know it's going to be a bad deck because his ability sucks. The -1 strength is not very meaningful in this game most of the time. So, you know, that's awkward. So then what do? I go to the next card, and then the next card, and then the next card. And you'll notice that that can get pretty tedious considering how many cards there are. So what I like to do is I like to filter. And so a lot of times it'll be by rarity. So most of your really good abilities are going to be on legendaries. So I'll start on legendary. And if I don't find anything that speaks to me then I'll open it up to the super rares. And then from there, I'll go check out the rares. I almost never go into the commons and uncommons. But I mean, let's do this. You know, we can thumb through some of these abilities. But let's say for example, I want to build a steel deck. So I can directly filter to the steel. And then I'm looking for something cool in here. So let me take a few moments. I don't need you guys watching me go while I try to figure out something in here that I like. So let me find something I like, and then we can talk about why I like it. All right, that didn't take nearly as long as I thought it would. Baymax. Yeah, Baymax looks really cool. So obviously there's a lot of really cool stuff in Sapphire, but Baymax Armored Companion. He's a 5 cost, he's inkable. That's huge. 5 is a really solid number, right? That's when you're starting to hit the mid game. Enough things have usually happened by this point that cards can be interesting. He's a 2/6. The 6 is really nice because there's not a lot of removal that hits that. The 2 strength, however, is unfortunate because there is plenty of red that deals with Baymax. So he's not probably going to win the game by himself, but his ability is what makes him really interesting. That's what makes him an A+ card, in my opinion. When you play this character, and whenever he quests, you may remove up to 2 damage from another chosen character of yours. Gain 1 lore for each 1 damage removed this way. Now, so Baymax clearly cares about healing, and it gains you lore when you do so. This makes me want to go one of 2 routes with Baymax. It either makes me want to go with something like Ruby with characters that enter with damage, and then we're playing like this really interesting Ruby Sapphire control deck, but also Baymax heals Mother Gothels and Mulans, and it's not your typical like item deck that your opponent is expecting. So you have like this really interesting combo of, hey, we're doing something that could be interesting, cool, potentially even really potent, on top of your opponent sees your colors and thinks you're doing something completely different, which completely throws them off, right? So there's this like, if I'm sitting down and I see my opponent, oh, you've inked a sail, for example, a blue card, and then you're playing a 1-drop popsicle. Okay, you're probably playing either Sapphire Steel or you're playing Ruby Sapphire items. Either way, you're playing items. I'm on to you. And then next turn you play a red 2-drop, whatever that may be, for example, or a one drop that's red, and you're like, okay, this is definitely items. And then turn 3, it's all like, oh, Mother Gothel, that's weird. Well, I've inked my card that would have been otherwise maybe really good against you, but I inked it because it's bad against items. So just those first few turns, if your opponent thinks they know what they're playing against and it turns out they're not, they can make some really bad decisions which are really detrimental for them in the long game. So that part's really cool. The other route is going with Amber, because he clearly cares about healing, and Amber also has a lot of cards that care about healing, so there could be a big healing synergy. His one detriment, however, is that he only cares when he does the healing. That's his only downside, but you can grab him, snag up 4. And usually when I build a deck, I'll be like, okay, that's a cool card, and I want this card, and I want this card, and you'll notice I'm grabbing 4 copies of everything. Right? That's just my starting point. Now, if you're struggling to find a character to center around, something that I will occasionally do if I'm feeling exceptionally roadblockish, I'll come up to decks, click on newest, and I'll just kind of get a feel. Sometimes I'm thinking like I really want to play one specific color. Maybe I haven't visited that color in a long time, and it's feeling neglected. Let's say that color's amber, right? I'll just filter by amber, and I'll just kind of get an idea like, oh, somebody thought of like a queens deck. Do I want to play queens? Yes or no? If I do, then maybe I want to see what they're doing. If not, then I'll stay away from it. Some of these don't make a lot of sense. Like I don't know what this means. So like, I avoid these. Yellow green discard. That's pretty clear. Bucky and friends. That's pretty clear. Like I don't know if I want to be doing that. So maybe I'll avoid that. This is something I'll do. But let's say the queens looks interesting. Now, contrary to popular belief, maybe not popular belief, but I don't just grab a deck and say it's mine. Obviously, that's a terrible idea. You shouldn't do that. I will occasionally grab a deck and throw it on Inktable to play against. I have done that, but I'm not taking credit for the creation of that deck. But I'll come in here and I'll look at it, and my very first gut thought is, no thank you. I don't want to play this. This doesn't look fun to me. So, no. But it could speak to me. It could be like, for example, I'm going to make up some stuff here just for the example of it. But let's say I'm looking at this queen. I'm like, oh, that's a really cool ability. Maybe that's the thing I want to build around. And I see that they've added these other things which synergize with it. I didn't think of those when I was looking at this legendary card. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the inspiration to be like, this is a cool card. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't think of these other things that go really, really cool with it. Like let me try my hand at that. And then that's what I'll do. I'll take those 2 or 3 cards, and then I'll build my version of a deck around that instead of, whatever else may be going on in here. And a lot of times I won't even look at items and stuff, mostly caring about my characters. So yeah, you can draw inspiration. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, let's go back and take a look at Baymax. All right, well, with Baymax snagged up, the next thing I want to do is his ability reads, when you play this character and whenever he quests, you may remove up to 2 damage. I'm looking for those keywords, remove up to 2 damage. Remove and damage. So let's see if we just type in remove damage, if that brings anything up. Okay, it doesn't like that. Let's try like what Baymax says, 2 damage specifically. And this is how I miss cards occasionally too. Like I missed Phil the other day in a video because he doesn't have hero in his title or his characteristics. So I completely missed him in my hero deck because I'm going off of these like keywords. But 2 damage. Whenever this character quests, you may remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. Okay, maybe maybe there's a payoff for some kind of healing. And I'll go through and I'll snag up things that are very similar. Remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. That does a thing. This one's really good. Removes damage and lets you draw a card. Return a character card from your discard to your hand, then remove 2 damage from chosen character. Yeah, that's a thing. So I'll go through and I'll try to find a bunch of these. And I'll grab a bunch of colors. Obviously, I know blue's going to be an important color. And since I know blue's going to be an important color, I'll usually start with blue because blue will help me filter out what it is exactly I'm trying to do with Baymax. Right, so a lot of these ambers might be kind of meaningless to ultimately what's going to happen. Baymax is blue. I know I'm playing blue. So we're looking at that. Something else to keep in mind, because you've played this game for a while, what are some things that actually go good with this? I actually know Grandpappy is a fantastic card. I forget how much it costs, but somewhere in here is a Grandpappy. There she is. He is? I don't know. Whenever you remove 1 or more damage from one of your characters, gain 2 lore. That seems like a really fun, potent combo with Baymax. So your Baymax gets to... The cost is out of order. However, you have a Grandpappy down, and then you play a Baymax. So first of all, when you remove 1 or more damage from one of your characters, gain 2 lore. So you're going to play Baymax or Grandpappy, then you're going to play Baymax. Baymax is going to optimally heal 2 damage, and then you're going to gain 4 lore because of Grandpappy's ability as well. That seems really cool. So we need to be able to heal damage, which means we need damage on characters. So we need to encourage either our opponent attacking us, or we need to play things that just have damage when they enter. And I think the way to do that might actually be with Ruby. It's hard to make your opponent attack you. It does happen, but there are decks out there where they just don't care about that. That's not a thing for them. You got Ruby, who just does removal, so that's not going to do the damage you are looking for. And then you have Steel, which can do the damage you're looking for, but typically when you're playing against somebody who knows what they're doing, they don't leave damage on your character. They banish your character. They're not going to sling out 1 or 2 damage, typically, in an effort to hopefully finish it up the following turn of the turn after. Those players, those decks, are going to clean up your characters. Which means what we need to do is we need to have characters that just have damage on them. And the only place I know where that happens is in Ruby. So let's see if we can't find something in here. Some clarification. The Beast enters play with 4 damage. So how can I take that ability? This character enters play. It just enters play potentially to filter them out. Hey, there we go. I found them all. So yeah, we got the Mother Gothels, enter with damage. We got the Mulans, enter with damage. And we got the Beasts, which enter with damage. What are some other things we can have? There's the Dinner Bell, which is actually an interesting card as well. And these are just things that I'm remembering. How do you spell dinner? Is it 2 N's? It is 2 N's. Diner's the other one. I always get the 2 confused. But this guy, card draw. Draw cards equal to the damage on chosen character of yours, then banish them. Yeah, we lose the character, but this is actually card draw. It's interesting. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to try to find as many synergistic pieces as I can that have to do with damage, and then we'll talk about those choices. All right, so let's talk about this real quick. Something else that occurred to me, so you got to be pretty mindful of these. Whenever you remove 1 or more damage from one of your characters, gain 2 lore. End of ability. What Grandpappy does not have is the ability to actually remove damage. So, with that having occurred to me, we need actually more ways to remove damage than just Baymax. So I've gone through, and we're starting to fill up the deck. It's getting pretty full already. 39 cards. You know, we're going 4 ofs of everything. 39, that doesn't sound right. Oh, that's right. I only went through on Dinner Bell. But we have Little Baymax. If you have an adventure character in play, you may pay 1 less for this. That's probably not going to happen, but can happen. Bear with me. But he has an ability that says pay 2, remove up to 1 damage from another chosen character. That's nice because it is a ink sync ability. It doesn't require him to exert. So we can pay 2, and then 4, and then 6, then 8, and heal up to 4 damage, and gain a whole bunch of lore off of Grandpappy. Whenever you heal 1 or more damage from one of your characters, gain 2 lore. So we're effectively paying 2, healing 1 damage, gaining 2 lore. With Beast, who has 4 damage, he enters play with 4 damage, right? So we could play him, play Baymax, get a Grandpappy down, which costs 7, by the way. So we're going into turn 8, or the 8th ink, anyway. And that's enough to activate this 4 times. So there's a little bit of a synergy in the fact that this costs 7, healing 4 times costs 8, healing 4 times means you gain 8 lore. So you could effectively drop a Grandpappy as long as you make it to the next turn. I mean, odds of you making it to the next turn are very slim, but this does exist. You could just pay a bunch of ink to gain a bunch of lore. That's pretty cool. But that's not all we got. We're running. It could change. These are just cards that we know work. So the numbers obviously could change and they might get cut entirely. But this is a song, cost 2, and you remove up to 2 damage from any number of chosen characters. Now we gotta be careful with Grandpappy. Whenever you remove 1 or more damage from one of your characters, gain 2 lore. I don't believe, just based on the way it's reading, if I were to heal 2 damage on everything, we would gain 2 lore. We wouldn't gain 2 lore per damage, because it's whenever you remove 1 or more damage from one of your characters. So it's possible, I think there's a ruling on this, I'll have to double check it, but if I have 4 characters and I heal each of the characters, I think this will proc for each character, but it won't proc for healing 2 damage. It'll only proc because it's 1 or more damage. Now if we only healed 1 and then we did a second one, because it's remove up to 2 damage. So we could play one of these, remove 1 damage from all of our characters, then play a second to remove the other 1 damage from all the characters to trigger this multiple times. That's a thing. Additionally, we're also running Baymax Healthcare Chip. It's an item, 2 cost. Exert it, choose 1, remove up to 1 damage from chosen character. Hey, that works with exactly what we're trying to do. Or, if you have a robot character in play, remove up to 3 damage from chosen character. We do have a couple of robots, so this actually has a little bit of synergy as well. And then, of course, Popsicle. And then something you might be seeing here. Yes, Popsicle heals damage. That's a thing, so we could use that. But our our item count is going up. And we have something else that cares about inventors. And I can think of somebody who fits that bill quite nicely. And he goes by the name of, where is he? He's in here somewhere. There you are, Flaversham. More card draw. He is an inventor. So we're starting to find some synergistic pieces, which is pretty cool. And that, yeah. All right. So now we want to so we have a strategy. Our deck's trying to do a thing. Now we want to try to make sure our deck can do that thing. So usually I like to look for things like, with these colors, we want to ramp. So that's big. So we're going to look for ramp. And then also in these colors, we're going to want removal. Nothing worse than just kind of sitting on your side of the field, focusing on your own thing and letting your opponent go wild. In a game where you can't interact while your opponent is taking their turn, it's important that your turn can interact. So we're going to look for ramp for this deck because these colors support it. And then we're going to look for removal. Removal is going to be huge. We are not going to win very many games if we can't control what our opponent's doing. So let me do a little digging and we'll talk about the choices being made for those departments as well. All right, so now we got ramp and we have removal. So let's talk about the ramp real quick. The ramp's pretty straightforward. 4 copies of Tipo, right? He comes down on turn 2, he ramps up. He makes it so our turn 3 is actually a Flaversham. That's always a solid just play pattern. A little bit of a concern with it. Obviously, Tipo does drain your hand. So unless you're going directly into a Flaversham to draw some cards, that means your turn 1 needs to be an item, which is, you know, a thing. Speaking of items, I did forget a very important 1-drop, a couple of ice blocks. There we go. But Tipo can also help out when you do have a lot of uninkables. Right now, we're currently sitting at 19 uninkables, which is an issue. Admittedly, we're also at 73 cards. I know you guys can't see that info at the top of the screen because my face is in the way. But we're at 73 cards in the deck, 19 uninkables. We'll fix that. We'll address that. So Tipo is ramp, and then the other ramp in the deck is Sail the Azurite Sea. I do want to ramp, but I don't see it as being critical. So we're not running Fishbone Quills, which funny enough have kind of cycled their way out. And then the other ramp piece is, oh, I'm completely blanking on it, but I've been getting away with sales and Tipos pretty consistently. So I'm going to follow through on that. Being able to draw cards on sales really nice. And then for my removal, a couple of interesting pieces stood out. Obviously, we're running Little Mulan for the built-in damage, but Little Mulan can shift into Big Mulan. And if Big Mulan gets to come down, this is a shift 5, 2/6 who quests for 2. That's fantastic. I mean, that's the same stats as Baymax. especially if we get the shift, and they even have the same cost. But when you play this character, if you use shift to play her, she gets +3 strength this turn, so it's 5/6. And during your turn, whenever this character deals damage to another character in a challenge, deal the same amount of damage up to 2 other chosen characters. It's cut off. I don't know if that particularly... Let's find out. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it gets cut off. I just have to open it in a new tab. Same amount of damage to up to 2 other chosen characters. This means you could actually hit your own stuff. If you're in dire straits and you want to have the damage on one of your characters, Baymax, Grandpappy, for example, Hiram, who has 6 willpower as well, you could deal a bunch of damage to them and then heal them to gain the lore off of Baymax's ability or Grandpappy's ability. That's always an option, which is really cool. Or more likely, Mulan just kind of wipes out your opponent's board. Removal. Another piece of removal, of course, is Little Sisu into Big Sisu. How can we resist? Madame Medusa is a fantastic staple removal card as well. We're running Brawls. And then I found a synergistic piece here, Teeth and Ambitions. This will deal 2 damage to one of our characters to deal 2 damage to one of their characters. Now, I am not convinced on this because 2 damage to an opposing character is not going to remove a lot of threats. There's a lot of big butts out there these days, and 2 damage is just not going to cut it. I have a feeling that despite this being really synergistic with our what our deck's trying to do, I don't think this card's actually going to be very good because it's not going to actually be doing removal. We're going to be paying into this to do nothing, kind of. Yeah, we get some damage on our opponent's stuff. We get some damage on our stuff. But if we can't immediately take advantage of being able to heal our character and gain the lore, then it's not super potent. However, if these are valid options when you can pull the trigger on this guy, much better card. So I'm looking at this and my 2 thoughts are either A, it's not going to be as good as we want it to, or B, it is not a card you keep in the opening hand. It's a card you want to draw late in the game because it's not meant to be removal, which is a weird choice of removal. So I don't know if we'll keep it, but our deck is currently sitting at 73 cards. So this is where I like to do a little bit of refining. So this is where we're going to look at the deck a little bit more in detail and start making some cuts. All right, had to adjust the size of my screen. I wanted to have this side by side. So first things first, we're looking at Uninkable. I'm always looking at Uninkable. What's an acceptable number? For me, an acceptable number depends on what the deck is capable of doing. If I'm running like Fishbone Quills, who can ink the Uninkables, T-Pos who can ink the Uninkables, other options to consistently ink Uninkables, the Hidden Inkcaster, for example, comes to mind in Emerald, then I'm comfortable with this number being a little bigger than typical. But normally I don't like this being greater than 15 if I can help it. If I can be sub 15, if I'm looking at 13 or 12, I am in love. I love that. Now, if I am running T-Pos and Fishbone Quills, 15 is kind of more like, okay, that actually feels really good. I'm comfortable with 15, generally speaking, but with a Fishbone, like 15 becomes like, okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And then I can probably go up as high as 17. I would never go higher than that. Otherwise, you're going to have constant issues. If you know you're going to be a high uninkable count, you need to make sure your uninkables are cheap because you want to be able to play them. If your deck has a lot of uninkables, they're going to be the cards that get stuck in your hand, which means those are the cards you're going to be playing. So you need to make sure that they're cards you really want to be playing almost every game because you're almost going to get filtered into having to play them almost every game. So first thing I'm looking at here are the uninkables. How many uninkables do I need? So I pretty much go through and I just kind of evaluate each card I'm looking at. Obviously, I put in big counts. I didn't go max counts on Sisu's because I just know that's just a thing in my brain that Sisu's probably never going to be a 4 of unless it's the main or only removal in the deck. Then I will go maximum on it. But outside of that, first thing that comes to mind is the Dinner Bell. I have card draw in Popsicle and I have card draw in Hiram. And if I want to keep the Ice Block, which also combos with Hiram and combos with the Sisu's, then I'm going to want to keep the ice block. That guy's already uninkable, so Dinner Bell is probably going to get cut. Usually what I'll do is I'll take everything down to 2, right? Like I said, I bring everything in at 4. So usually I'll drop it down to 2 and then try to evaluate from there. But knowing that that only brings me down to 18 and I'm kind of already pigeonholed into these other cards. Got to keep the Grandpappy, want to keep the Sisu. Sisu might become a 2 of, honestly. It's a big girl and she's not going to hit everything. So we'll cut her down to 2. Dinner Bell's going to go away entirely. That's another thing. Don't be too attached to your cards. They don't all fit in every deck. Just cut them. Just cut them ruthlessly. I know Madame Medusa is going to become a 2 of pretty quick as well. It's expensive. It's uninkable. Grandpappy, I would also consider cutting down. There's 2 lines of thoughts. One, it's a main staple of what we're trying to do with the deck. And the other is it's expensive. So like it goes both ways. It might just become a 3 of because it's expensive, right? We don't want to see this many times. We don't want to have 3 of them in our hand at any one point, right? And the more cards, more copies of it in your deck, the more likely it is that you have multiple copies in your hand at any given point. And we don't actually want that. We only need 1 Grandpappy. You can gain multiple lore from multiple Grandpappies. That is a thing, but being so expensive and uninkable is rough. However, looking at that, we've made our uninkable cuts. We're down to 13 uninkables. We do not need to cut them anymore. In fact, we could bring a Grandpappy back in and I'd still be comfortable at 14 because I have ramp in the form of Tipo, who can get rid of uninkable cards in those instances. And this is a card we will be actively looking for in the mulligan. This and Sail. Those would be 2 really important ones. But now we're at 67 cards, so we still have to make some cuts. So like I was saying earlier about Teeth and Ambitions, this can be somewhat of a non-bow if we don't have the payoff for it, if we don't have the way to heal for it. This could be an issue. 2 damage on your opponent's stuff is not going to clear a lot of things. It can kill a Diablo, potentially, provided they're not at a hidden cove, which it always seems like whenever I play against my friends who play Diablos, they always have a hidden cove. It's very annoying that they always have it. But technically it can take out a Diablo, and it might be worth staying at 3 for that. If you're not super concerned about Diablo, if it's not something you run into a lot at your locals, I would definitely take this down to a 2 almost instantly. Because that's the only like edge case where I'm like, 3's pretty good. Diablo does exist. Other cards I would look at are cards like this card, Ever As Before. It perfectly synergizes with exactly what we're trying to do, except if we don't have Grandpappy in play. Think about this. Grandpappy's the only one that actually cares about things being healed after it's already in play. Baymax, again, only cares about he himself and his robotic booty. He doesn't care about anybody else doing anything for healing. He's completely isolated himself. So with that being said, Grandpappy's the only thing that cares about seeing healing cards. So imagine for a moment, if you will, that you have 2 copies of Ever As Before in your hand, because we got 4 right now, and it's likely to have multiple copies. And you don't have a Grandpappy, and you've just dropped a beast who has 4 damage on him. You're like, okay, well, I could heal him, but if I heal him, then I'm gonna have this awkwardness of not gonna get the value I would because Grandpappy's not in play. So I'm just wasting a card to keep a beast alive. I'm ruining the synergy. The issue with Ever As Before is that it doesn't do anything else. If there's no Grandpappy, it just heals characters. That's it. Nothing. No payoff. Healing your characters is fine, but as I was saying earlier, your opponents don't tend to just do damage to your stuff. They tend to just get rid of it. It just gets straight up banished. So there's not usually a lot of damage left to be healed because the character's gone. That's a thing. So yeah, this does open you up so you can do some attacking and then healing. But because of that reason, I'm going to make Ever As Before a 2 of in the deck. It's really nice, synergizes really well with Grandpappy. There's even a chance that this just comes out of the deck entirely because it does not contain any other synergy with any other card in the deck. Only synergizes with Grandpappy. That's it. Okay. So what are there any other cards that are like Ever As Before? That's my next question now. What else am I looking for? We got things like a Baymax healthcare chip. This is an interesting card. I like that it's an item. I'm not really inclined to cut items. We're already down to 11, and Flaversham's already a really good card, and he just gets weaker and weaker the fewer items there are in the deck. Now, I have been seeing Flaversham being run with just popsicles, and that's it, and that blows my mind. That is wild. So you could cut some of these, but I think we'll just cut one. I think we'll just cut one. All right, next thing's next. I'm just kind of scanning real quick just to see what's what. Another thing, don't put a lot of stock in this, but another thing I like to look at to kind of help me make decisions where I'm like, I need to cut 4 more cards and I like everything. What the heck am I cutting? So something else I'll look at is I have 10 items and I have a Flaversham. Okay, I'm not touching items. I'm just going to ignore the fact that they exist. I'm not going to touch them because I have a really strong synergy piece. If for whatever reason Flaversham was to come out of the deck, maybe I would then immediately go and revisit the items because they're not as important at that point. But as of right now, we're ignoring them. All right, songs. I'm looking at songs and I'm thinking, I have no synergies for songs. This is definitely a candidate for something to look at more closely for cuts because I have nothing else that cares about them. Okay, actions. Let's do the same thing. Actions, it's hard to find synergies. There are some synergies now. Maui Shark comes to mind, for example, but we're not running it. But these are really straightforward. It's Sail and it's Brawl. It's straight up ramp and straight up removal. Those are 2 key areas that red-blue deck really wants. Those are going to be hard to cut, if I'm being honest with you. Might go down to 3 Brawls. A 3-cost... what's the word I'm looking for? A 3-cost conditional removal can be tricky at times. That's the word I was looking for. Conditional. Condition being 2 strength or less. Ice blocks make that a little easier, so that's okay. Synergy. There's synergy built into that. And I got 41 characters. That's a crap ton of characters. I'm probably making my cuts in the characters. So if I want to make some more educated decisions about what I'm cutting, I'll look at the curve as well. You like to have what we call a bell curve. That's where you start off low on one side, low on the far side, and they go up into a nice tall curve. And they end up looking like a bell. It's a bell shape. That's why they call it the bell curve. That's what you're looking for. You want your bell curve. For me, my bell curve happens to be on 2. 2 is the top of my bell. So I got a lot of 2 drops. And it peters out. It has this weird flattening effect. You actually don't really want that. It's hard to account for a bell curve when you have so much ramp. So that's a thing too. We have 8 ramp cards in the deck. So we're kind of skewing over. It doesn't change your cost, but it does mean we're going to have a lot of ink and not a lot of big plays with it. That's what that could mean. You could obviously miss your ramp, but you know, that's the thing. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, man, I have a lot. In fact, I have 22 drops. That's probably the area I'm going to look at first, just because that's really, really high. And I might consider something in the higher end to remove some of these, even though I know what these are. These are Sisus. Those are Grandpabbies. 6 drop. That's an interesting spot to look at. I think that's just Mulan. Let's take a look. 6 drop also includes Madame Medusa. Okay. How much removal do I actually have? I got Sisu, Madame Medusa, Big Sisu, Brawls, potentially Teeth. So about 4.5 removal type things in the deck. Mulan is a sort of removal, so maybe 5 removal. Because if I'm counting 2 halves here, it's a lot of removal. It really is. It's not perfect removal. It doesn't cover all the bases, but Madame Medusa is very strong. It does cover a lot. I think we're going to cut down a Mulan. It's not as potent as we want it to be. Can be pretty potent, but it's not as potent as we want it to be. And with little Mulan being so easy to get rid of and only 4 copies, the shift isn't the most likely thing in the world. The other thing I'm going to look at is things to cut. So we saw our 2 drops and our 3 drops, but 2 drops really. So Mother Gothel, we want to be careful. These are our like built-in synergy pieces. Don't forget we can still just attack and get damage on our characters that way. That's always an option as well. So we don't need everything to be built in with a ton of damage. So maybe we'll keep 3 Mother Gothels, possibly 2. This is going to go back and forth for me. And then I need something else to cut. We're down to either 1 or 2 cards to cut. Again, looking at the 2s, I have a bunch of 2s. I have Sails, Teeth, Ever As Before, Baymax's healthcare chip. We're not going to touch items. We already talked about that. I'm not going to touch my ramp. That really just leaves the Teeth and Ambition. I'm going to cut you down. I'm going to cut Mother Gothel down. And just like that, we're at 13 uninkables in a 60 card deck. Subtotal of $99.45. I happen to own 100% of this collection. There is a little bit of a curve. Our curve is on the lower side, so the ramp should make this deck really easy to play. I don't anticipate we're gonna get stuck on a bunch of high costing characters, especially when all the red ones have shift and they come down earlier. Actually, that seems pretty good. Oh, not you. Meant to click you. There we go. All right, so now we have a deck that does a thing. What is next? Next, you have to play the deck. You do have to play the deck, and it's only when you play the deck that you're going to find out what works, what doesn't work, what is the issue you're running into, if any. Does the deck just perform really well? That's pretty rare, but sometimes the deck can just be like, yeah, this did exactly what we want, and it's unbeatable. Very rare, very not likely to happen, but I've had that happen a few times where I've created a deck and I'm like, holy crap, that did exceptionally well. But just a brief little recap here. We picked something that looked interesting to build around, Baymax, and instead of building directly around making Baymax specifically be the thing that is the powerhouse, the key of the deck, we analyzed his ability and have leaned into it, right? He's looking for characters that want to have damage on them. So we found characters that enter with damage. That helps him. If we're going to have characters that enter with damage, what's the next step? Well, we're going to want to make sure that these guys aren't just going to die instantly every single time, right? So what's some other things that we care about? We got another Baymax that heals characters, so we're not always going to have big Baymax. We got another thing that cares about things being healed, because we got a healing synergy thing going on now. Shoring up some weaknesses with removal. We got some ramp. Like, yeah, sometimes the decks just build themselves. It's pretty cool. And it all starts with finding which cards you want to play with the most. For me, it was Baymax for this deck. Tomorrow, I will play this deck, and we will do a little bit of analyzing, a little bit of rebuild on the deck to get an idea of what it is. I know this was a very strange video for what I typically make here on this channel, but it seems you guys really did enjoy the thought process behind how I was making decisions with my deck. So I thought I'd just give you guys the entire spiel. What is it like for me to make a deck? Now, normally I'm not explaining a lot of this, so for me, building a deck is usually a lot faster. I can usually build a deck in 5 to 10 minutes, typically. So, you know, that's a thing. You can get pretty quick at it. And yeah, well, thank you guys for watching. You'll have to let me know in the comments below if you like this, if you want more feedback, more in-depth analysis about specific decision points, that sort of thing. Because sometimes I'll look at a card, I'll be like, oh, Baymax, he's good for these 2 reasons. End of assessment. And you guys are like, whoa, wait a minute. What about this? What about that? What about this other thing? And I'm like, I didn't even think of those. Like, they didn't even cross my mind. So yeah, let me know. But before we take off, we have to spin the wheel. Oh boy, even more of you today than there was yesterday. 36 of you. Okay. Well, as always, if you want to win one of the 4 grand prizes, you have to be a member of Patreon at the $25 tier. Link is in the description down below. We're going to shuffle this up and spin this. I'm giving away a couple of enchanted cards to a winner, the Dragonfire DLC versions, booster box, and the Stitch gift set. And it looks like today's winner is going to be, I'm gonna butcher this, Nerdy. Nerdy? Is it a silent K? Nerdy. Congratulations. All you have to do is reach out to me via Discord. I just need your shipping address. The link for Discord is also in the description down below, so you can join my Discord there, send me a direct message, or you can reach out to me via my email, which you can find on my YouTube homepage. Again, just need your shipping info. That's all. Congratulations again. Thank you guys so much for watching. And again, if you have any more questions or you want me to elaborate more, this is just like a shotgun, like, hey, here's my general thoughts on this. This is not going to be a polished version of, like, step by step. So, you know, if you have any questions, just let me know. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.